Um, so my name is Brittany Usman, and I am here to talk to you today about demystifying PDF accessibility. We're going to look at clearing out some pesky errors and some unfamiliar tips. So a little bit about me before we get started. I am an instructional designer at the University of Texas at Arlington. And so I design online courses with faculty. And through that, I've become an accessibility advocate because I'm always coaching faculty on how to make sure their documents and videos are accessible. And I even authored a white paper to recommend a proactive approach to accessibility. So I'm always the one in the room who says, but wait a second, is that accessible? And then when I'm not doing those things at work, I'm at home being a mom to a 6-year-old boy and a new 4-month-old girl. So today's topics are divided into 4 main topics. The first 2 are using the content and tags panel, as well as the tips and tricks. Those, if you are here and you're more intermediate or advanced user, you might say, well, hold on, these kind of seem a little beginner, but those are really going to build some foundation steps that I'm going to be referring to whenever we're in the more complex topics of issues with auto tag and clearing out the pesky errors. So as we go through those tips and tricks, if you're saying, I already know this, just bear with me. It will all make sense whenever we get to those more tricky topics. And then another note about the presentation today is I have included how-to slides for your future reference. So today I'll be giving a live demo of those how-to steps. So you'll see me skipping through those slides, so you're not missing anything. Those are just there for your future reference. And then there are also some bonus slides that we just don't have time to cover today. You can download this from the handouts and review it on your own. Those bonus slides are things like the actual text property for a tag and setting a table header's scope and associating header cells. So before we get started, I wanted to ask you guys a question. So if you can go to menti.com, menti.com, and use code 2671905 and answer the question, how comfortable are you in making PDFs accessible? And the answer choices here are, I don't know where to begin. I struggle with it and I still find many errors. I rely on the accessibility checker and can clear most of those errors. Or I'm confident I know what I'm doing and I just use the accessibility checker as a fail-safe. And I'm going to switch over to see the poll here. So get a live look at what you guys are saying. So we've got, it looks like a majority of people so far are saying that they rely on the accessibility checker and can clear out most errors. So that's good. You guys are in a great starting point. And it looks like the trend is staying the same as we get votes in. Second place is that you're struggling with it and you still end up with many errors. Third place is they're confident, know what I'm doing, and just use it as a fail-safe. And then finally, I don't know where to begin. So for those of you who've said like you don't know where to begin and you struggle with it, the first part of today's presentation, going over some of those foundational tips and tricks can get you started. And then at the end, it's just even more in-depth tips for you. So thank you guys for participating in that poll. So first up, we're going to look at the content and tags panels because I'll be referencing these 2 things throughout the presentation today. I'll either say we're on the content or on the tags panel. So those are the ones you use extensively when you are ensuring a PDF is accessible. So let's compare the 2. So your content panel is where your actual text, your images, and your links that compose the document live. If you delete something from this content panel, it deletes it from the entire document. And this is what determines your layering order. So your visual order, if you have multiple items that are layered on top of each other, depending on the order that they appear in the content panel, is which one appears on top visually. So in the screenshot, I have a page 2 open where there are several containers. Contents are organized in containers, and there are some artifacts. There's some headings as well as paragraph and figures, and those are the contents. Now the tags panel is going to specify what kind of content those text, images, and links are. And if you delete a tag, the content still stays on the document. And this determines the reading order for a screen reader. So in this screenshot of the tags panel, I've got the similar content. It's just the tags right now of your figures, your headings, your paragraphs. And if we expand those items, you see that same text that we saw in the content panel is now inside those different tags. So let's get to some tips and tricks. So you might ask yourself, where is that tag? I cannot find it. And you might need to find a tag to check or add alternate text to a figure, to make sure the tag is correct, to add a link reference to an existing tag, which this is the use case that I use the find tag tool the most often. Or maybe you're working on a really long document and you had to step away and now you're coming back, you've reopened it and you need to pick up where you left off. So we are going to find a tag by using the options button and find tag for selection. So I'm going to switch over to a live look at what that looks like. So I've got a document here. It's an open chemistry and context chapter from the textbook. And let's say I'm on page 3 and I need to find the heading for this text, the domains of chemistry, because I want to check to make sure it's the right heading level. And I don't want to scroll through my tags and try to find it. So you can select just one word from that. You don't have to select the whole thing. And then I've got the selected, and I'll go up to the options button in the tags panel and click find tag from selection. And in the tags panel, it automatically pulls me to that part or that tag. A pro tip I have is sometimes when I do that the first time, it doesn't actually pull me to it. And I just simply click on the find tag from selection, and that second time it will work. So that's how you find a tag. It's really helpful when you don't want to scroll through tag by tag. So next up, you might see some incorrect tags and you may need to manually change them. You might need to do this after you run the auto tag feature, or if you're just checking a document and you find that tags are incorrectly labeled. So we'll be doing this in the tags properties. And still working on that same document, let's pretend that that heading for the domains of chemistry is currently a heading level 2, and it should be a heading level 3. So I'm going to right click on the tag itself and go to properties from the menu that appears. And then the type drop down, I'm going to change that to a heading level 3. And then I click close. And now the tag has updated from H2 to H3. So those are pretty easy. You can also select multiple tags at a time using Control or Shift on your keyboard and change multiple ones at a time. It's a little time saver.
Brittany, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay.
But we did actually have a request if we could slow down just a little bit.
Certainly. Okay, so next up, our next tip is you might find yourself saying, well, let me just make my own tag. And you might need to make your own tag if you're manually tagging and the reading order stops. And I'll talk about an example of when that would happen. Or if your figures change in appearance or the location where they're tagged changes whenever they're tagged. Or if you are building out list and table tags and you don't have all of those sub tags, you may need to create a tag for that. So how to manually create it, it's a 2-part process. The first part is going to be creating the new tag. And then the second part is going to be assigning the text or item to that tag. So let's switch over and look at this example. I'm still on that same textbook example, and I've got the H3 selected for that first heading. And if I click the next tag, the next paragraph tag, I see that it's skipped a paragraph. If I keep going, it never goes back to that paragraph that it skipped. So I need to make a tag for that. So you're always going to right click on the tag above where you want the new tag to appear. So I'll right click on that H3 tag and click new tag. And from the type drop down, I will choose paragraph. And I'll click OK. And now it does pull you to the first page of your document. But if you just click on a tag from the tags panel, you can get back to where you were. So now I'll click on that empty tag that I just created. and making sure you're using the selection tool, which is the arrow at the top. I'm going to select the paragraph. For this case, I do need to select the entire paragraph. And then I'm going to right click on that empty tag and choose create tag from selection. And then you'll notice that the chemist study and describe text for that paragraph now appears inside that paragraph tag. So this is how you would manually create a tag if you needed to. All right, my next tip is going to be in terms of saving your work. And I have a mantra to share with you that is save often, but save smart. So what does that mean? Well, some actions that you take when making a document accessible cannot be reverted with the undo option. So you want to make sure that you've saved at a good point where if something messes up, you can get back to a good point without having to start over. Examples of when you cannot do the undo option are if you're tagging an item with the reading order, if you need to delete items from the content panel, or if you're making changes using the table editor. Those are just 3 common examples that I run into. So my tips for when to save are before you're tagging a complex figure. And what is a complex figure? If you select a figure and there's more than one bounding box, which are those little purple boxes, then those have a greater chance of changing their appearance once it's tagged. So there's an example image, and you're going to see this image throughout the presentation today. So there's 3 shapes. There is a circle with a mountain view in it. That's the top layer. And then the middle layer is a hexagon. And then the back layer is a rectangle. And those are all stacked on top of each other, but a little bit offset. And you'll see there's multiple bounding boxes. There's 2 or 3 bounding boxes around each of those shapes. So if you if you select that kind of figure and you have all those bounding boxes, you would want to save your work before you actually tag that as a figure. You would also want to save before you tag artifacts. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. And finally, before you're deleting items from the content panel, because that cannot be undone. Now, when do you not want to save? The big one here is when working in table editor. If you're working there and you adjust the column and row span settings before you save, I would run the accessibility checker to make sure I don't have any table regularity errors. And the reason for that is because once there are table regularity errors, it's sometimes hard to work in table editor. You might not be able to select the right cells that you need, or your table might even break and it won't even let you get in the table editor. And I'm going to show you an example of clearing out table regularity today. So if there are no table errors, once you run the accessibility checker, then that's when you go ahead and save your work. And then moving along with that, the process of when to save, I also recommend a process for when you tag certain items. So for figures, I recommend tagging figures after you've tagged all other items. And why do I do this? As I mentioned before, sometimes figures can change appearance or location once you tag them. And so I use that whole save often, save smart. I want to be paying special attention to every figure that I tag to make sure it doesn't change its look. So before I tag all my text items, and then I go back and tag all my figures, and I pay special attention while I'm doing that. And then after I've tagged all those figures, then I move on to artifacts. And the reason for this is because sometimes when you're tagging artifacts, when you go to tag something else, like a paragraph, Acrobat is not creating additional tags. So when you create an artifact, Acrobat does not create a tag for that. So it kind of turns off creating tags. And I'm not for sure the reason, but I think that somehow can prevent new tags from also being created. So I always do artifacts last. And then my final tip before we get into some of those errors are a couple of additional accessibility checkers. The 2 I have are free and available for PC. One of them is called Pack 3, for PDF accessibility checker. And the other one is Common Look PDF validator. Pack 3 will check additional items such as if table header cells are associated